way out. But so let's do it.
Thank you. I've got 35 retired preachers and 3 retired DSs in my church, and I'm always intimidated preaching for them. I've never followed an evangelist. And so you win. I got nothing. My first sermon, I was so excited. Before my first sermon, I was so excited. Young, zealous, Foursquare pastor, I had my Bible and I had the Holy Spirit, and I thought, what else did I need? And I got up and preached the greatest sermon ever on the difference between Jews and genitals, rather than Jews and Gentiles. Seriously. So I've always thought about that, and I thought I've got nowhere else to go but up. Well, I don't have, when Pastor Phil asked about 10 outreach ideas, I have to confess, I don't have 10 outreach ideas, and here's why. It's different in every place. And so the most evangelistic thing we ever did in Wasilla, Alaska, it was Christmas Sunday, and I showed up. I was a new pastor there. And we showed up Christmas Sunday morning, and there is a dead moose hanging from the front of the church. Amen. With a big gut barrel right in front of it. Right? This is Alaska, but it was Sunday morning, Christmas Sunday. I showed up in my suit and my tie. I thought I was looking good, and I got a dead moose hanging on the front of the building. And I'm trying to figure out, oh my goodness, who did this? And I had a pretty good idea who did it. How do I get rid of it? And I started talking to some people, and they looked at me like I was an idiot. I get that a lot. And then there's nothing else to do. We had Christmas Sunday immediately after the benediction. They go get the moose, they bring it in the kitchen, and they start gutting it. Start cutting it up. This was Christmas Sunday. I later learned that that church had a roadkill ministry. Anybody have a roadkill ministry in your church? Well, so what they would do is when a moose would get hit, they would go out, and it happened a lot. This is Alaska, they're everywhere. They're like cats. They're really big, but they're everywhere. We would go out, and when a moose would get hit, the highway patrol would call us. We would go out, we had an hour to pick it up. It's 30 below too, so you gotta do it quick. And they would bring it back in, they would gut it, and then we would harvest that moose and send it out to the food banks and all those people in the area. We led more people to Jesus because of the roadkill ministry at that church. So here's my number one evangelistic idea: start a roadkill ministry in your church, right? The reality was, though, people needed the food, and there were people who were not yet ready to come to church, but were willing to help their neighbors. And so we had people with us at 3 o'clock in the morning going out to harvest these moose. Never been to our church before. They would come in, they'd come into our church kitchen, they would help us cut that thing up, they would help us distribute that, and after doing that for a year, they'd find Jesus because they met him through the people of the church. So, feel free to start. So I don't have 10 outreach ideas for you, but I have some principles that I've learned over the years, and I'd like to share those with you instead. So there's a story in 1 Samuel chapter 4, and I'm not going to read it just for the sake of time, but essentially in 1 Samuel chapter 4, what's happening is the Israelite army, they just lost to the Philistines. And they lost badly. It wasn't even close. And so their great plan is they're going to go and get the Ark of the Covenant, and they're going to take it into battle with them. And that way they can't lose. And so they go and they get the Ark, and there's some stuff going on with Samuel. He's not in a great place. And the priests are not in a great place. They take the Ark and they take it into battle. You know what happens? They lose the Ark. Right? They're shocked that they lost the Ark. How could God do that to us? Now the Philistines are shocked that they have the Ark and they're not sure what to do with it. And so they go and they put it in the town, in the temple with their God. The first day they come back, their God is on his face. They prop their false god back up just like we like to prop our false gods back up. And then the next day they come in, and not only is their God on his face, his head is rolled off and there's no fixing it. And then the next part of that, they just pretty much walk away and that part of the temple is dead to them. So the Philistines, they take the Ark and they send it to another town. Boils break out in that town. They don't like that. I love that in the Masoretic texts, they translate the word boil as hemorrhoids. Feel free to use that. It's a horrible translation, but it's really fun to preach. So these hemorrhoids break out on this entire community. And their solution is to take the Ark and send it to a different town. Another Philistine town. And it makes you think, what did this town do to this town? Yeah. So they send it to another town, boils break out, people are not happy, people are dying, and it sounds like the plague. Their solution, they pull everybody together, and their solution for the Ark is to send it to a different town. another Philistine town. The Philistines in that town, they've heard the stories, they don't want it. They build fences outside their town and say, no, we're not taking the ark. And so the leaders, they all pull their heads together and they decide to send the ark back to the people of God. I really was going to read it this morning, but that's the gist of it. But they don't want to just send it back because they know they've messed up, and so they decide they need to send back tribute with the ark. So they make rats, and they golden rats, 5 golden rats, and 5 golden boils, one for each of the tribe, or 10, I can't remember the number off the top of my head. And they send it back. Now here's what's terrifying. When they send it back to the people of Israel, they're so excited that the ark is back. And it comes into the town, and they're surprised that the Philistines, there's some special preparations they make with the oxen. But they stand at a distance. The Ark of the Covenant goes back into Israelite territory, and they're so excited. What do the Israelites do? They look into the Ark. Right? They know better. They look into the Ark, and they're struck dead. Then what is the next thing they do? They send it away, just like the Philistines. So the people of God were treating the presence of God just like the enemies of God. Now, the reason I wanted to share that story is because I think sometimes we in the Church of Nazarene, and I love the Church of Nazarene, I didn't grow up with you, I chose you, and you let me come. So this is my choice that I'm giving. But sometimes I think we treat revivalism like the ark. And we are so busy trying to seek after revivalism. And we treat that like it is a Spirit of God, like it is a tool for us to use. And we miss revival. And so the first thing I just want to say is stop looking for the ark. Stop looking for the silver bullet or the perfect program. The reality is we are a revivalistic denomination without a revival. That's where we are today. But that does not mean God is done. It just means God is going to work differently. So stop looking for that silver bullet. I don't think it's out there. Start seeking the Holy Spirit, and everything will change. The second thing I want to say is from the book of Habakkuk, chapter 3, verse 2, and I'm going to read that. In Habakkuk, chapter 3, beginning in verse 2, verse 1. A prayer of Habakkuk the prophet. Lord, I've heard the report about thee, and I fear. O Lord, revive the work in the midst of the years. In the midst of the years, make it known. In your wrath, remember mercy. The New Living Translation says, we've heard of your deeds. We've heard of your glory. Do it again in our day. In your wrath, remember mercy. So, I say that because I think a lot of our churches, and I pastor a church that's got 5 generations on any given Sunday morning, which is both beautiful and challenging. It's more beautiful and challenging. The challenge, though, is that each of those generations has a specific song, or a specific pastor, or a specific evangelist, or a specific event that they point back to when they experience Jesus. That's beautiful. The problem is, it's been so long since they've heard Jesus that they only can go backwards. And so they have great memories and very few dreams. And I think that we're a denomination that's 100 years old. We have great memories. But I talk to a lot of churches and a lot of pastors who have very few dreams. And I just want to say, I love that I'm following you, because point 2 is let's pray that God does it again in our day. Let's quit seeking programs and start seeking the Spirit of God and pray that He can do it again in our day, because we believe He can, but it may look different. Yes? I think I would also say that one of the things that I'm experiencing right now with evangelism and outreach is I actually lead more people to Jesus at the coffee area between services than I do at the altar at the end of service, which is fascinating and strange at the same time. And I do altar calls on a regular basis. Nearly every Sunday we have some kind of response time. I believe those are really important. But what I've found is people who don't have history with the church or history with Jesus are having a difficult time saying yes until they understand what they're saying yes to. And so the Spirit may move into service, but they have questions before they're ready to say yes to the Spirit. And so providing that freedom for people, not just trying to do everything in an altar call moment, but create an environment of evangelism where the salvation can happen at any time, not just at that one time. The challenge that we currently have is that our churches are, my doctoral dissertation was apathy and passivity in worship in the Church of Nazarene. And one of the challenges that we have is that our entire services are formed around that moment of the altar call, that crisis moment. And I don't say this is bad, it's just a reality. We have developed our worship structure based on a camp meeting model, which is powerful. But what happens when nobody gets saved at the end of your services? Right? So if everything drives to the moment of salvation and we don't have new people in our churches or everybody's already saved, then the challenge that we have is people come to church to watch other people get saved and we just, why are we there? We're a revivalistic denomination without a revival. The easy solution is we start seeking after the revivalistic spirit. Better songs, better music, more entertaining, whatever that is. One of the definitions of apathy is tristia, or acedia. It's a Latin word, and it means a flurry of activity. So, because we are a revivalistic denomination without a revival, we fall into apathy or passivity, and our solution is to create more activity. I think that's going to do something different. He's not done with the altars. And absolutely that is a place where God can change lives. But let's not try to just recreate revivalism. The revival may come in a different way. Number 3 is understanding the context. One of the things I struggle with when I go to church conferences, and one of the beautiful things about heaven is there will be no more church conferences. Right? But one of the things I struggle with when I go to those conferences is you'll hear 10 evangelistic things at work. I wish they would always say, in my town. Or in my town today. So I think we have work to do that is beyond a YouTube video or a really popular preacher at a really large church, or even another preacher at another church in town. I think we all have our own work to do. And some of that work is to create a spirit in which we have opportunities to tell people about Jesus, is we have to understand our demographics. The Church of Nazarene, if you don't know this, will give you the demographics for your community for free. So my church, when we got there, and I love my church, so please don't hear it as I'm fixing everything. They are a beautiful, amazing church. But their mission statement was a ministry of hope at home, across the street, and around the world. I asked the question, what is the name of the principal of the school across the street? They didn't know. What is the percentage of our neighbors who do not speak English? They did not know. But as I was interviewing there, I had already pulled this information because I wanted to know. 40% of my neighbors are primarily Spanish-speaking within the 10 blocks of our church. The average income for the 10 blocks around my church is $17,000 a year. We have this really big evangelistic event called No Greater Love. And years ago, it was so sold out, we see 1,700 people, we'll have 10,000 come to it, we charge $5 a person. Which means that our neighbors cannot afford to come. You have to understand your demographic, and the culture has shifted so strongly around the church that we didn't recognize that. I also think if you want to talk to your neighbors, invite them to talk about themselves. We've hosted focus groups in our community, inviting them to come in and tell us about what they struggle with, what they need help with in the community. It's hard to get them to come to a service, but if I invite them to come in to talk about themselves, we can begin to build that relationship. The other thing that you can do is go to all your community meetings. When's the last time you went to a city council meeting or a school board meeting? You want to look at opportunities for evangelism. Get to know your community well. And then I would say that you're a 501c3. You're a nonprofit. You were given that for the reason of doing good in your community. One of my DS friends like to say, if you're not doing it, give it back. So one of the challenges I think we have is we look at evangelism And we look for evangelistic opportunities, and we try to copy what everybody else is doing. And there's a leadership book that talks about red water versus blue water. So the red water is, there's a wounded fish in the middle, and all of the other larger fish are coming to eat from that fish. That's the red water. So when you look at your fishing opportunities in your community, a lot of our churches are doing the exact same things. There's 8 other Nazarene churches in my community. There's hundreds of other churches in our community. And we're all doing the exact same things. Maybe we need to tread out to the blue water, to go where nobody else has been yet, to do something that nobody else has done yet. I think the Spirit often leads us to the blue water. I think our programs and our pragmatism leads us to the red water. So as we seek the Spirit, we will end up going to places we didn't know were there, doing things we never thought we could do. But I believe that as you get to know your community and as you're in relationship with your community, as you're following the Spirit rather than seeking a program, God will start to move. And then make sure you know your next steps. There are so many places where they have these amazing evangelistic opportunities that lead to nowhere. It's just a dead end. And so my community is about 40% LDS. And so when we had this No Greater Love event, at the end of that, the expectation was that I would stand up and do an altar call. Do you want to confess with your mouth and believe in your heart that Jesus is Lord? Raise your hand. And then we would celebrate however many. I began to ask the question, how many of those people are already Christians? And what are we converting them to? What we found out that next year when we asked, instead of just the raise your hand, we invited them to fill out a form. If you say yes, what church are you a part of? What we found out was about 50 to 60% of the people who were raising their hands saying yes to Jesus were a part of the Mormon church. We were converting them back into the Mormon church. That wasn't the goal. So we had to begin to restructure how we would do that altar call with those next steps. So you have to know what your process is. You can have a great event that leads nowhere, and unless you're able to disciple them and figure out how they can be discipled, I'm afraid that it's short-lived. We can talk more about that, but I'm going to move on. I would also say it used to be that we could do a big event in our community and everybody would come to Jesus. That's the tent meeting model. So we are an event-driven denomination. That is our DNA. I think we sometimes forget we're also a missional denomination. Yeah. So it's not just the camp meetings, but it was also the work with the people in the fields and the people who are struggling with addictions. So I think one of the things we need to make a shift towards is let's continue to do the events, but look for ways to be missional in your community, which is why it's so important to really know your community. And by that I mean become a faithful presence in your community. Are you known? So when I interviewed at every church I've ever interviewed at, I walk around the town and say, what are you known for? What do you know about this church? And usually what I hear are, oh, that's the church that holds this event, or that's the church that the pastor had a failure, or that's the church that, so they know a thing about the church. And it may be a good thing that they know about the church. One of I think our challenges is we need to become known for more than just what we do, but for who we are. And that shift will change everything in your community. So how do you become a faithful presence in your community? Moving from simply event planning to people who are present in the community in a variety of ways. One of the ways that you can do that is to host all of the nonprofits in your community. We do a nonprofit breakfast once a year, invite every nonprofit in the community. We cannot do everything that's being done in the community, even as a church as large as ours, but we shouldn't have to. But what we can do is become an expert on all of those nonprofits in our communities so that we can begin to connect the dots for people. So all of a sudden we become known for the church that you can call when there's something going on in your life, and if we can't help you, we know who can. And it is, so we moved from just a church who does this big event to a church who is faithfully present in our community. Through that process, though, we also have learned some of the gaps in our community, and that's our blue water. Where are those things that, of all of the nonprofits that nobody's able to or is doing, and where can we find that space to work? And so I don't have 10 ideas for every church. My goal is to have 2 or 3 for the church I pastor, to find those blue water spots. And then I would say number 9, focus on health versus size. You know, people will often say, well, the church is growing really fast. God must be moving there. I've experienced that, but cancer grows fast too. So just because something grows fast doesn't mean it's sustainable, and it doesn't mean it's healthy. And what we wed people with is what we wed them to. And so if we have evangelistic strategies that don't point to Jesus but point to something else, we cannot be surprised when their lives don't change. And I just really want to force us to focus on becoming healthy. And here's why. The greatest evangelistic tool you have in your church are your people. Period. It doesn't matter, you can have the best preacher and the best music come into town, and if your people are not Christ-like disciples, people will come, they may find Jesus, and they will go somewhere else. Or you can have mediocre preaching, mediocre music, and people who are on fire for Jesus, and your church will grow. So you've got to focus on health as opposed to, we focus so much on how do we win people for Jesus. I think we have to first start with how do we disciple people to be like Jesus. If we do discipleship well, evangelism will follow. If we focus only on evangelism, discipleship doesn't follow. And so I think for us to be missional, we really need to spend as much and more time on focusing how are we discipling our people than we are what's the next event that we're going to do. And here's the crazy thing to me. We are a denomination that, and again, I love our church, so please don't hear me in a negative way, but we are a denomination who, our mission statement is to make Christ-like disciples of all nations. I was in a denominational meeting with, and it was at General Assembly not 4 years ago, but 8 years ago. And there was an entire session of what does it mean to be a Christ-like disciple? We're 100 years old and we haven't defined that. We haven't defined it to the point where everybody in the room can answer the question. So every church I've gone to, the first question I ask the board is, what is a Christ-like disciple at this church? What is that target that we are shooting for? And if you can't answer that question, you're missing your mission. Yeah. It's because the reality is when people join our church, I tell them, don't join our church because of the pastor, don't join it because of the music. Those things change. But look around at the people in the church and ask yourself, do I want to be like them? And if the answer is yes, then join that church. So when people are coming in and we do our membership classes, we do cover we don't drink, and here's why. We have the Celebrate Recovery Ministry. We do not drink. None of my leaders drink. We are 100% hard on that. But our invitation isn't one to hear the things you're supposed to stand against. Our invitation is, if you come here, this is the kind of person you will become. And so we have 5 things that we say, this is what a Christian looks like at Banquet First. This is what a disciple, this is our goal. And I would just really urge you to make sure you've got that clear so you know what you're shooting for. Because if you can demonstrate what will happen, how your life will be changed when you become a part of this church, evangelism then becomes really easy. Because as people's lives change, they tell everybody else about it. And then all of a sudden, you start having new people come to your church, and you didn't do any event, and you didn't spend thousands of dollars planning for this thing. You've got people in your church telling the people about what God is doing in their lives. And that culture, I would love to tell you I'm a great preacher. I would love to tell you we have the best musician. We may have the best musician in the denomination. But nobody has gotten saved, and our churches don't grow simply because of the preacher or the programs. And as the people in the church change, it changes the community. And as those people are faithfully present in all of the different places in our community, then rather than an evangelistic event, we have an evangelistic people. And that changes everything for the culture of the church. So become healthy and train your church what it means to be a disciple. And then number 10, train your people. Train your people about how to be a Christ-like disciple. Part of that for us is to share our faith. It's amazing how many passionate people want to tell people about Jesus but don't know how. So we have a woman who came to our church because she was an addict. She was a hardcore addict. She was living on the street. She was selling her body to, this is near Bible, this is a rural community. She came to our church. She found Jesus. She gave her life to Jesus. Her marriage was restored. He found Jesus. Amazing stories. Their kids have not yet found Jesus. She's been with us a year when she came and said, I really don't know how to share my faith with my daughter. I was so focused on her victory that I stole her victory. So I'm fully convinced that to disciple people, we have to show them how to share their faith. Not so that Jesus will love them, but because they love Jesus, help them to find ways to do that. So I do have a couple of things that have worked for us in every church. The first thing is, I think that the Great Commission, especially out of Mark, where Jesus says to go into all the world, we hear that as geographical. Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the ends of the earth. I think we also need to hear that as every space. To go into all the world means to go into the school, to go into the hospital, to go into the care centers, to go into the clinics. It is to be Jesus into all of the places that you go. I think it's really easy for us to reduce evangelism to missions trips or events, but to move it relationally. So training people to go into all the world. One of the things that we did, I'll leave this for Phil. We were a church, our last two churches were 100-year-old churches who were well known in the community. And we were known for some good things, and we were known for some bad things. This church I went to was going through a church split when I came. So when I would ask, well, what do you know about our church? Oh, that's the church that's fighting about. And they weren't wrong. So one of the things that we needed to do was I had to change our focus from what we're standing against to who we're standing for. We had to just make that cultural shift. And what I found is there were people in our church that had amazing testimonies, but we were so focused on what we were against that we were missing what Jesus was doing. And so a friend of mine is an evangelist, not with the church in Nazareth, but he helps churches put together books for their churches. And so I'll leave this one for Phil. But we put together 7 testimonies from people in our church, professionally written and edited and graphic designed by this company, who the graphic designers used to work for Hollywood. They did all the Shrek movies. The writers and the editors have written for some really large organizations. They do a really good job. What we did is we invited people in our church to sponsor this, and we were doing this at a point in which my budget was upside down, I was laying off staff, and we were killing programs. But we invited people in our church to sponsor these testimony books, and our goal was to send one to everybody within the 10-block radius of our church over a 3-year period. And so we did. It took us 2 years, but every home within 10 to 15 blocks of our church got this book of testimonies. These are all real people in our church. So when the people got the testimony books, they would come to our church, they could actually meet these people. It's like $4 a book. But this is what I didn't know. When the people in our church began to read the book about their church, they fell in love with their church. So I was looking at this as a way to reach our community because I'd given up on the church because they were fighting with each other. But what happened is the church fell in love with each other again. And then they began to tell people about their church. And they began to, I couldn't get them to witness to anybody. Now they're giving these away like crazy. So that cultural shift on top of a tool to share those testimonies. Be happy to talk to you more about that. We also live in a community that is right next to a Christian college, Northwest Nazareth University. So as we were working with our community, we found out that one of the blue water areas was medical and counseling. There was not enough in our community for people who had no transportation and had $17,000 a year of income. So we've actually started a medical clinic and a counseling clinic that's free to the community, open several days a week. But we did this in partnership with the other nonprofits in our community, so it wasn't funded through the church. It's its own separate 501c3. so that we can partner together. We can lock arms with other people who believe what we believe. And we partnered with our college, and so they're sending interns over to do the counseling for free, medical students. So that doesn't work in every community, but that's one of the blue water areas that we were able to do. What does work in every community is there usually are people in the medical profession that are willing to donate their time 1 weekend a year and will host a free medical clinic on your site. And there's structures already out there to do that. That's one of the things that's worked really well for us. We also recognize that when people get baptized, a lot of us will have, when somebody dies in your church, how many of you do funeral dinners for them, for families, or some kind of a reception afterwards? How many of you do that for people who are baptized or dedicated children? And what we realized is when somebody was getting baptized, they would invite their entire family. They were all coming to church. And so we wanted to do a meal for them to celebrate that afterwards, where all of our pastors go to, and we get to meet their whole family. We get to tell them they get to share their testimony. All of a sudden, it's not just 2 minutes into a service where we have a whole bunch of non-Christians we'll never see again. We're spending an hour or two with them as an entire staff. And they are there to support somebody who has just shared their testimony about how Jesus has changed their lives. Those lunches have become transformational for our church. We do the same thing for baby dedications. Because a lot of the younger couples who are dedicating their children, their parents are not yet Christians, or they used to go to church but don't. And so finding opportunities to celebrate those life events with people in your church and let them share their testimony, we find people coming to Jesus through that. And then we look for connection events. How can we join with what God is doing in our community and be a part of celebrating that? Which means sometimes we celebrate with other churches that God has moved powerfully through them, because we believe that all ships rise together. And when the church and the body of Christ works together, the kingdom of God opens up. And so breaking down that tribalism, and this isn't with non-Christian churches, but with Christian churches, because we believe we can walk arm in arm even if we don't see eye to eye on all the details. And then all of a sudden, we're no longer that church that is against, but we're that church that loves its community and loves its neighbors, and minds beginning to change. So, that's the gist. I've got one more for you. One of the, Alan Hirsch has written a book. He's written a lot of books. But he's got one book that talks about bells. And I'm going to give it to you real fast. It's a really simple book. It's like $4 that you can buy for everybody. But essentially what Alan Hirsch is saying, it doesn't matter what you think of his theology. Well, it does, but but not for this. He talks about training your people to be evangelistic. And I do believe that the spiritual laws and the Roman roads, those are all valuable. But I don't think they're all sufficient. And so one of the things he's come up with is the bells, B-E-L-L-S. And it's the challenge for the church to bless one person every week. So every person in my church has been challenged to find one non-Christian to bless every week. However they choose to do it. And they don't report back to me, but this is a lifestyle. Find one person to bless. And they're not supposed to go there and say, hey, you're my project this week. I'm going to bless you. It's just learning that lifestyle of being a blessing to people. No strings attached. Step one. Number 2 is to eat with one non-Christian a week. As a 100-year-old church, I was shocked by how many people in my church did not know a non-believer unless it was a child. And so we challenged them to eat with one non-believer a week. However they wanted to define non-believer. But just to look for opportunities to eat with non-believers. So bless one person every week, eat with one non-Christian this week. To set aside a time for an hour a week to hear what God is saying, and to fast during that time. So we actually fast on a weekly basis. I know it doesn't look like it, but we do. And we fast on an annual basis. We invite the church to periods of fasting. But we invite our church to pray for those people in their lives that don't yet know Jesus, and listen to what Jesus would say for how to live in relationship with them. And then learn to live like Jesus in all the world. So looking for ways when they go into the world that they can represent Jesus well. So they listen, and then they learn for opportunities to do that. And then the last question the last one, the S, is sent. And it's really to ask yourself this question at the end of every week. How did I resist what Jesus was sending me to do? Or how did I obey what Jesus was sending me to do? It's the BELLS program. We've got bookmarks that we put out. I've referenced it a lot. It's a super simple thing. But what we have found is people genuinely wanted to share their faith with people. They didn't know how to do it. And it's a stretch to go from, I'm a Christian, here's the Roman road. But this began to create that opportunity for that. So that's the BELLS program. Here's the last one. And I'll actually send this to Phil. In the next issue of Grace and Peace magazine, I've written an article. I shook it out in the fall, I think. Spring, I don't know. Next one. One of the things that we need to do is to disciple people better. And by we, I mean the churches that I pastor. You may be doing it perfectly. But we've got 5 generations of people who have different experiences with Jesus. There's no one program that's going to work for everybody. And so we have developed what is known, what we call an individual discipleship program. So my first degree was education. I'm an English teacher. And as an English teacher, we had students that had different needs, and so we would write IEPs for them. They would come in, we would meet with them, we would figure out where they were struggling, and then we would pull all of the resources of the school together for the success of that student. So what I've done is taken that IDP and turned it into an IDP, Individual Discipleship Program. And so all of our leaders now, when we recruit them, we ask them to come and meet with me or one of our other pastors, and we write an individual discipleship program for each of our leaders. And the reason we do this is because we want them to be able to do that for everybody they're leading. So new board members, new Sunday school teachers, anybody that's in a leadership position, we do an individual discipleship program with them. And what that looks like, and I'll give it to Phil, is we have a 3-page process that anybody who wants to grow in their faith, we invite them to come and sit down and talk to us because we recognize that there's no perfect Sunday school class. There's no